From the sick man of Europe to the continent's greatest hope, the image of Germany has changed radically over the last few months. With the United States moving towards isolationism at the speed of light, Berlin is emerging as the greatest hope for a more decisive European Union. Will it succeed? Stay with me to find out here on Wider View. And I'm your host, Mateusz Mazzini. Our main story tonight focuses on the beating heart of European politics. These days, it very much finds itself in Germany. Again, after years of stagnation, lack of economic growth, and, most importantly, lack of even remotely charismatic leadership. With a new incoming coalition, more trust from allies, and enormous challenges at home and abroad, Friedrich Merz finds himself in a position no German politician has faced in years, perhaps even since the times of Konrad Adenauer. It is impossible to predict if he will be successful. And not even because nobody knows the future. The present is changing at a speed dazzling for even the brightest minds. Meanwhile, problems require immediate decisions and actions. Will Merz have enough time to rearm Germany and help rearm Europe? Provide support for Ukraine? Install hopes in the markets before Trump's tariffs really kick in? We explore all these questions in our report.
Historically, an alliance between the Christian Democrats and the Socialists would be referred to as the Grand Coalition. This year, however, there is nothing grand about it. The joint support of both parties does not exceed 50% of the electorate. It shows not only the erosion of traditional political groups, but also the rise of new ones. Alternative for Germany, or AfD, the radically anti-migrant party with neo-Nazi ties, came second, taking a fifth of the votes. Die Linke, a post-communist left-wing group, re-entered parliament after years of absence. On the surface, it might look like nothing has really changed in German politics over the last years. Deep inside, however, changes are radical and impossible to ignore. The country is divided in the most visible way, reminiscent of the Cold War era. The East overwhelmingly votes in favor of AfD, while the West remains loyal to coalition parties. But there are themes that unite even the divided. The country's industrial economic model is no longer delivering growth. Bureaucracy is choking on migration paperwork, while innovation is scarce. Merz wants to solve a lot of these problems through decisive leadership. He announced more centralization of power on EU matters for his party, the CDU. The chancellor-in-waiting also promised a sharp break with his policy of fiscal prudence. He now says Germany must do whatever it takes in the area of defense to protect itself from the Russian threat. From the onset, this looks like a necessary and correct move. But critics accuse him of breaking campaign promises even before assuming office. His term as chancellor has not yet started, but already looks rocky.
Will Friedrich Merz save Germany and Europe in the process? How much time does he have before the voice of criticism grows too loud? And what's next for the German economy in the age of tariffs? These questions are of utmost importance for everyone in Europe. So let's try to answer them with the help of our experts. Joining me tonight are Ralph Bollmann from the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung and Professor Axel Dreher, Professor of International Politics and Development at Heidelberg University. Good evening both, and welcome to Wider View.
Good evening.
Ralph,
good evening.
I want to start with a rather general question directed to you. How much do we already know about the incoming German coalition, in particular with regard to most critical personal appointments? Walk us through the nouns of this.
Well, we don't know very much about who will be sitting in the government. We will have, of course, Chancellor Friedrich Merz and probably Vice Chancellor and Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil from the Social Democrats. And I think that the first priority of Friedrich Merz will be foreign politics, European politics, and of course, in the situation in which we as Germans and as Europeans are at the moment, with the threat by Russia, by Vladimir Putin on the one side, and on the other side, Donald Trump, who is threatening the German economic model, as it was mentioned in the film. And of course, he won't help us in military and security issues. So Friedrich Merz will try to have a strong partnership with France and with Poland for a stronger Europe, mainly in military and security issues, but not only. That's, I think, is one of the most important things for him. And on the other hand, the problems we have in German domestic politics for the moment won't be so important for him as we will have the next elections, hopefully in 4 years. And that's, of course, a chance to make all the troubles we have now with the Poles who say that the AfD is the strongest party and so on. Perhaps that could change if Friedrich Merz and Lars Klingbeil are successful with their CDU-SPD coalition.
So we already know that this is going to be a very foreign policy heavy term, at least at the beginning, for Friedrich Merz. So on that note, I want to move to you, Axel, and ask about one appointment in particular that is very important from the perspective of where we're sitting right here, meaning Warsaw. So that's obviously the appointment of the next German foreign minister. Initially, we've heard rumors circulating in the German press that it was meant to be Johann Wadepool that was the front runner for this seat. Now, it seems to be the case that there are more contenders, including Armin Laschet, the former leader of the Conservatives, also sort of applying for this job. How much do we know about this appointment in particular?
Well, this is basically about what I know about it. This would have been the two names I also would have mentioned. Wadepool seems to be the front runner. I mean, Laschet has been mentioned, but it's not yet clear at all. The only thing that is clear is that this is a ministry that will go to the CDU. The main reason for that being that Boris Pistorius stays on as Minister of Defense. And these two ministries, Defense and Foreign Office, are historically with two different parties. But who specifically it will be is as yet unclear.
So how much do we know about the possible foreign policy direction? Because I'm assuming that independent of whether that is Laschet or Wadepool or someone else from the CDU, the overall foreign policy strategy is pretty much set. So what will this appointment say about Merz's foreign policy ideas?
Well, he will have his own ideas about foreign policies, and that will be reflected in this appointment, of course. But the lines seem to be straightforward. So what has already been mentioned, there needs to be some collaboration in Europe, needs to be a counterbalance in military expenditure, in building up a functioning defense in Europe, maybe an own defense industry. There need to be some protection across that Germany kind of binds in the nuclear deterrence in Europe. This will be the main things. And of course, trying to deal with the American president in a as productive way as possible, avoiding tariffs for Europe and so on, will be like the main things to start with. But then the key points will be just to survive and make it to the threat of the increasing opposition from AfD.
We're going to talk about the possibilities of AfD actually exerting some pressure on the Merz government in a second. But on that note, I wanted to return to you, Ralph, and ask about something that's already been mentioned because it's unavoidable these days. Obviously, the threats of instability, for lack of a better word, coming from Washington, D.C. Merz seems to be having very, very specific ideas on how this is going to play out in the next few weeks or months. He already mentioned them in public. In fact, let's listen to what Friedrich Merz had to say about European and American relationship a few days after the last election.
I am in close contact with many prime ministers, heads of state and governments in the European Union, and my absolute priority will be to strengthen Europe as much as possible, so that, step by step, we can really achieve independence from the USA.
Quick question. How will Friedrich Merz navigate the US-German relationship, Ralph?
Well, it's, first of all, I think it's an irony that Friedrich Merz becomes German chancellor in this situation, because he was always one of the most explicit transatlantic politicians in Germany with very strong connections to the United States. And of course, if he could have chosen, he would have chosen another situation and a close relationship and close partnership to another US administration. But things are not like this. And so I think he will try, of course, to talk to Donald Trump and to try to change something, but he has no illusions. That is my impression. And so he knows that Europeans have to rely on themselves. And perhaps one remark to the question who becomes foreign minister and what will that mean for German foreign relations. I think there is a difference between the two candidates, Wadepool and Laschet, because Wadepool has a very strong position, like Friedrich Merz himself, against Russia, and a clear position that we have to strengthen our military efforts. For Armin Laschet, it's not so sure. He's a very sympathetic and liberal democratic politician, and when I'm talking to people here in Berlin from different parties and to colleagues in journalism, and they all say, well, Armin Laschet would be perfect for any ministry, but he should not become Minister of Foreign Affairs because he is not tough enough against Russia.
Noted, Ralph, and we will certainly take that also into consideration in our own calculations here in Warsaw. We're staying with you, a short follow-up question. Another very important politician in this geopolitical riddle is obviously going to be Ursula von der Leyen, known not necessarily to have been the best of friends with Friedrich Merz. So staying with you, quick question. How will the relationship between Merz and von der Leyen play out in the near future?
Yeah, of course. As a biographer of Angela Merkel, I have to say that, of course, Ursula von der Leyen was always a close friend of Angela Merkel and their liberal approach to Christian democracy, to liberal conservative party in Germany. And of course, because of that, not a friend, Friedrich Merz. So there were rumors in Brussels that it would become very difficult between them. But I don't think so. I think that both of them showed that they are quite flexible, especially in this situation, and they know which things are to do now in Europe. And Friedrich Merz, many people have forgotten that at the beginning of his career, he was a member of the European Parliament, and he is very, very pro-European because of his political mentor, Wolfgang Schäuble, and Helmut Kohl, of course. And so I think in the questions which are important now on the European level, Friedrich Merz and Ursula von der Leyen are really close together, and perhaps it could be an advantage that both of them are members of the same party of the Christian Democrats of Germany. That could make some things easier in Europe.
One of the very few voices of optimism on this show in the recent weeks or even months from you, Ralph. But moving over to you, Axel, there is a triad of foreign policy questions here, and I want to complete that triad with a question directed to you. Germany and Ukraine. This might differ sharply depending on who's going to become a foreign minister, but Merz himself seems to be quite a vocal advocate of strengthening the support for Ukraine. What's next in this line of relationship?
Well, the reform of the debt brake makes it possible to exempt spending for defense, and that includes also aid for the Ukraine. So in principle, there is no limit that we had in the last period of Parliament, which probably will mean that we can increase spending. And he has already in the past mentioned that he would like to deliver Taurus to Ukraine, and he's brought that up again as at least as a threat towards Russian President Putin, that Germany will be able to deliver Taurus missiles in close cooperation with partner countries, but it is unclear as of now what exactly that might mean. So what would it mean in cooperation with partner countries? If the US cannot be meant with that, other European countries, they don't really have this missile system. So yeah, it's on the table, and I expect support to continue and Germany to be able to at least step up in small parts for the loss that arose due to the withdrawal of the United States.
So following up on what you've mentioned, obviously reindustrialization, rearmament of both Germany and Europe as a whole will require major financial decisions of utmost importance. How exactly is Friedrich Merz going to do that, also from a domestic agenda point of view?
Well, the coalition agreement has two parts on that. One is to have a voluntary army, so rather than conscription, every male young person will have to register, and so that is the first step. And then they try to have 5,000 volunteers in the first step, who then can start with a 6-month period that could be extended for up to 23 months. So that's the idea of building up the personally relatively weak army of around 180,000 people currently in Germany. And the second is, there was already in the past period this 200 billion fund for the army. It is of course not enough in the medium run, which basically has been depleted and will be depleted soon. And what has happened here is that with the majority in the previous parliament, even though the vote had already been taken, it was clear there's no longer a legitimate vote in the old parliament. This old parliament decided a reform of the constitution, which will now allow that spending in excess of 1% of GDP will no longer on defense will no longer be counted towards the debt brake. And this 1% minimum is meant to secure that there is no substitution. But of course, spending on defense has recently been around 2%. So part of that spending will be replaced by additional debt. Mm-hmm. But yes, there is no upper limit. In principle, there is the limit of the European debt brake. We have this 60% threshold of the European Union that's still in place. We have the 3% deficit threshold of the European Union. But for Germany itself, when it comes to military expenditures, including help to Ukraine and other countries that are being attacked, there is no limit on spending by the former debt brake anymore.
On that note, thank you very much, Axel. I wanted to move to you, Ralph, and ask about the domestic side of this equation, because the Christian Democrats very much campaigned on the promise of fiscal prudence, austerity, you name it. We all understand what was behind these words. And almost immediately after the election, Merz makes a 180 and promises increased spending for obvious reasons, and I think it's fairly easy to sell it politically. But will this backfire from the point of view of domestic opposition?
Yeah, of course, I think the mistake was not to make this change of the debt brake after the elections, but the mistake was, of course, to make an election campaign which was quite illusionary in financial numbers, as the CDU not only said we won't change anything on the German debt brake, but we will lower the taxes by 100 billions of euros and so on. And it was a program, an election campaign full of illusions. And yes, perhaps we could even say full of lies. And that's, of course, a point which brings many problems now. And I'm not sure if it would have really been a problem for the CDU to be a little bit closer to the truth before. Perhaps I should say that there's not only the change in the debt brake for military reasons, but there's as well a 500 billion euros program for infrastructure and climate investments. Well, that's a little bit less obvious, of course, than the military investments, but I think that could be if it goes well and if it will be spent for reasonable investments, that could help to stabilize German economy, and perhaps it could help as well at the end for military things, of course, because Germany is the country in the middle of Europe, and in case of a armed conflict between the NATO and Russia, it would be important to have our bridges, streets, railway lines, and so on in order to make military transports possible.
Absolutely. On that note, I wanted to display a final piece of data to both of you and then ask you to comment. We see right now on the screen the changes in support for political parties, particular political parties, between 2021, previous election, and 2025. The obvious outlier here is a major growth of support for AfD. So very quickly, a question to both of you, starting perhaps with Axel. Is it possible that AfD will grow further on the fertile soil of criticizing Friedrich Merz and actually topple this government even before the next election?
Well, yes and no. I do think the AfD will become stronger. I do not think that it will be possible to topple this government. So the government, with this huge monetary leeway, is just able to sort out major differences. They will just postpone any important reform, any major disagreement, and they make sure there is enough money to do so. I mean, money was the problem, the debt brake was the problem that ended the previous government. And this problem is not on the table this time. There's this 500 billion infrastructure fund, and the definition of infrastructure can be very broad. The same goes with the defense expenditure. You have just mentioned that it would be good to have roads to transport troops, but that could even be defined as military expenditure. And so there's a huge leeway for this government to spend money. And so I'm absolutely convinced that they will make it through the whole period.
I'm afraid I have to cut it. I'm afraid I have to cut it here for Axel. Final words from you, Ralph. Yes or no, or maybe?
I think the situation is open, but if the coalition does a good job doesn't mean big disruption or something like that, but just governing without all that conflicts, discussions which we had in the old government. It could be possible that the AfD doesn't go further. And that's important, of course, also for Europe as a whole, because the main difference, to say this one word, main difference between the AfD and the Populist Party in Poland is, of course, that the AfD is also very much pro-Russian, and that would be a real catastrophe for Europe if they would get more influence in Germany.
Friedrich Merz is obviously up for a very big task, which means we will be very carefully following and scrutinizing his progress. Ralph Bollmann, Axel Dreher were our guests tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whatever happens next in Germany will have profound consequences for all of Europe. The moment is paramount. The time to act is now. Friedrich Merz is going to fight a battle for the future of his country and his vision of Europe as a whole. A battle he cannot afford to lose. Thank you for being with us tonight. Next week, we will take a closer look at the future of democracy in Serbia. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, be with us next Thursday, and have a good evening.